It was just an ordinary day on the family farm. A little girl played under the sun, her laughter filling the warm summer air. But hidden in the tall grass, something deadly was already closing in. It was just an ordinary day on the family farm. A little girl played under the sun, her laughter filling the warm summer air. But hidden in the tall grass, something deadly was already closing in. The morning light spread over the rolling fields of the Harper family farm in rural Georgia, casting golden rays across the green pastures and weathered wooden fences. It was the kind of day farmers dream about, warm, bright, with just a hint of a breeze carrying the scents of hay and wildflowers. For 6-year-old Emily Harper, it was a day of pure freedom. Barefoot and giggling, she darted across the yard, her tiny hands clutching a bouquet of dandelions she had collected from the meadow. Her sun hat, a bit too large for her head, flopped with every step as she skipped between patches of clover and buttercups. Life on the farm was simple, but it was rich in its own way. Emily knew every corner of this land, from the big red barn that stood like a sentry near the road to the shady oak where she liked to rest when her little legs grew tired. She wasn't alone in her adventures today. Trailing her faithfully across the grass was Grace, the family's large white goose. Grace had been part of the Harper household for years. Originally brought in to help keep the garden free of pests, she had quickly become something more. She was Emily's constant companion, her feathered guardian. Wherever Emily went, Grace followed, her bright eyes always watchful, her waddle surprisingly quick when it needed to be. To Emily, Grace was just another playmate, albeit one with wings and a funny, honking laugh. To Grace, Emily was something much more. Something precious. The farm buzzed with its usual rhythm. Emily's father, Robert, was fixing a section of fencing near the horse paddock. Her mother, Carol, was gathering vegetables from the garden to prepare lunch. Birds chirped from the treetops and the distant lowing of cows drifted on the breeze. Everything felt safe, familiar, until Grace's behavior suddenly changed. Emily was busy lining up her dandelions on a flat rock near the porch steps, arranging them by size, biggest to smallest, when she noticed the goose had stopped following her. "Grace," Emily called, looking over her shoulder. The goose stood rigid in the middle of the yard, neck extended, eyes locked on something in the grass. Her usual gentle clucking had ceased. Instead, she let out a low, warning hiss. It was a sound Emily had never heard before. She frowned, puzzled, and rose to her feet. "What's wrong, girl?" Grace took a cautious step forward, her webbed feet brushing against the dry earth. Her wings twitched, half unfolded, as if ready to spring into action. Emily followed Grace's gaze toward the tall grass bordering the yard. At first, she saw nothing unusual. Just the familiar sway of weeds in the breeze. But then, a flicker of movement. A sinuous ripple through the green. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Something was there. Of course, Emily didn't yet understand what she was looking at. At 6 years old, her knowledge of danger came mostly from fairy tales and farm stories her father told at bedtime. She knew to stay away from the rusty tools in the shed and not to wander too far from the house. But a snake? She had never seen one up close. Grace, however, knew exactly what it was. Her instincts, sharpened by seasons of prowling the fields and protecting the coop from foxes and weasels, screamed in alarm. The serpent slithered closer, its coppery scales catching the sunlight in flashes of orange and brown. Its tongue flickered in and out, tasting the air. It was a copperhead, venomous, aggressive, and dangerously close to Emily. Grace stepped forward again, her body tensing like a coiled spring. Emily, sensing something was wrong but not fully grasping the danger, called out, "Daddy!" Her voice rang out across the yard, but Robert Harper, still working on the fence, didn't hear her over the creak of wood and the hammering of nails. "Mommy?" Emily tried again, her voice a little louder this time, tinged with uncertainty. Carol, too, was out of earshot, her back turned as she filled a basket with fresh-picked cucumbers. Emily's small hands tightened around her bundle of dandelions. She took an instinctive step back. And that's when the snake struck. It lunged from the grass with terrifying speed, its mouth open in a silent snarl, fangs glistening with venom. But before it could reach Emily, Grace exploded into motion. The goose hurled herself between the child and the serpent, her wings flaring wide, her beak aimed like a spear. She struck the snake with a sharp, bone-jarring blow, driving it back into the grass. The copperhead recoiled, hissing furiously. Grace didn't flinch. She stood her ground, honking and flapping her wings with wild intensity, making herself appear larger and more menacing. Emily's eyes widened in shock and fear. "Grace," she cried out, tears welling in her eyes. But Grace was already in battle mode, her full attention locked on the threat before her. The snake coiled again, preparing for another strike. In the house, Carol finally heard the commotion. She dropped her basket and sprinted toward the yard, her heart pounding. Robert, too, looked up from his work, alarm flashing across his face as he saw his daughter standing frozen near the porch, the brave Goose locked in combat with a venomous predator. "Emily!" Robert shouted, vaulting over the half-repaired fence. But Grace was already acting faster than anyone could have imagined. As the snake lunged once more, she met it head-on, snapping her beak down onto its body. She battered it with her wings, driving it away from Emily with sheer determination. Yet in the struggle, the snake managed to land a bite. Grace recoiled slightly, a pained squawk escaping her throat, but she did not abandon her post. She continued to fend off the snake until Robert arrived, shovel in hand, and delivered a decisive blow that ended the threat once and for all. The copperhead lay motionless in the grass. The danger had passed, but the damage had been done. Carol scooped up Emily, clutching her daughter tightly to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "You're safe, baby, you're safe," she whispered, her voice trembling. Emily's eyes, still wide with fear, searched for Grace. The goose stood nearby, her chest heaving, blood staining the pristine white of her feathers near the site of the bite. "Grace," Emily whimpered. Robert's face darkened with concern as he saw the telltale puncture marks on the goose's body. Without hesitation, he gently gathered Grace into his arms. "We need to get her to the vet. Now." Carol nodded, holding Emily close as they rushed toward the truck. The family's hearts pounded with urgency. Grace had saved Emily. Now it was their turn to save her. As they sped down the dusty farm road toward the nearest veterinary clinic, Emily cradled Grace in her lap, tears dripping onto the goose's soft feathers. "Please be okay, Grace," she whispered over and over, her small hands stroking Grace's head. The goose, though weak, let out a soft, reassuring honk. As if to say, "I'm still here." The pickup truck bounced along the dusty country road, its tires skidding over loose gravel as Robert Harper pressed the accelerator to the floor. Emily sat in the passenger seat, her arms wrapped tightly around Grace's trembling body. The goose's feathers, once bright white, were now streaked with red near the site of the snake bite. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths. "Hang on, girl," Emily whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. "Please hang on." Carol sat in the back, frantically searching for the number of the veterinary clinic. Her fingers shook as she dialed, praying someone would answer. "Green Valley Animal Hospital, how can I help you?" came the voice on the other end. "We're coming in now," Carol shouted, barely able to keep her voice steady. "Our goose, she was bitten by a snake. We're about 10 minutes away." "Stay calm," the vet technician replied quickly. "We'll be ready." The call ended, but the tension in the truck remained thick as fog. Robert's knuckles were white around the steering wheel. He shot quick, worried glances at Grace in Emily's lap. Emily couldn't stop crying. "She saved me, Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. "She saved me." Robert's throat tightened. "I know, sweetheart. She's brave. She's the bravest goose in the world." The veterinary clinic came into view just as Grace let out a faint, strained honk. Emily's heart nearly broke at the sound. The truck skidded to a stop in the gravel parking lot, and Robert leaped out, scooping Grace gently into his arms. The veterinary team was already waiting at the door, a gurney ready. "Here," Robert called. 2 technicians rushed to meet him, carefully transferring Grace onto the gurney. They wheeled her inside as fast as they could move. "Emily, stay close," Carol said, grabbing her daughter's hand. But Emily pulled free, determined to follow Grace inside. "Please let me stay with her," she begged. A kind-faced vet knelt beside her. "We're going to do everything we can to help your goose, Emily," she promised. "But we need to work fast. Can you be brave for her, just like she was brave for you?" Emily sniffled and nodded, her small fists clenched at her sides. "I can be brave," she whispered. Inside the clinic, the team sprang into action. Grace lay motionless on the examination table as the veterinarian, Dr. Harper, no relation, examined the bite wound with practiced urgency. "Venomous bite," he confirmed grimly. "We need antivenom immediately." "Is she going to make it?" Robert asked, his voice tight with worry. Dr. Harper didn't answer right away. "She has a chance," he finally said. "Geese are tough animals. But we're racing against time. The venom is spreading fast." They worked swiftly, administering antivenom and fluids through and for. They cleaned the wound, checked her vitals, and wrapped her wing to stabilize her. Emily watched from the corner of the room, her heart pounding with fear. "Come on, Grace," she whispered over and over. "You can do it. Please." As the minutes stretched into an hour, Grace's breathing became steadier. Her eyelids fluttered weakly, but she didn't open them. The vet glanced at Emily and offered a thin, hopeful smile. "She's fighting," he said. "She's a fighter, just like you." While the vet team continued their work, Robert and Carol sat with Emily in the waiting room. The air smelled of antiseptic and worry. Emily's mind raced with memories of Grace. The way she chased butterflies across the yard. How she honked happily whenever Emily came outside. How she once waddled after Emily all the way to the barn just to keep her company. "She's my best friend," Emily said softly, looking up at her parents. "I don't want to lose her." Carol hugged her tightly, tears welling in her eyes. "I know, sweetheart. She's part of our family." Robert placed a comforting hand on Emily's shoulder. "Grace is strong," he said firmly. "She didn't give up when she faced that snake, and she's not going to give up now." As day turned to evening, Grace was moved to the recovery area. Dr. Harper explained that the next 24 hours would be critical. "If she can make it through the night," he said, "her chances improve significantly." Emily begged to stay. Reluctantly, the staff agreed, setting up a small cot in the corner of the room where Grace rested. Emily sat beside her feathered friend, gently stroking Grace's head. "You saved me, Grace," she whispered. "Now I'll stay with you." Carol and Robert kept vigil as well, their worry etched deep into their faces. Night fell over the clinic, the shadows lengthening on the walls. The quiet beep of the monitoring equipment filled the room, each sound a small reassurance that Grace was still fighting. Emily eventually drifted into a light, fitful sleep, her hand never leaving Grace's feathers. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, Grace stirred. It was subtle at first, a twitch of her wing, a flutter of her eyelids. But then, with great effort, she let out a soft, hoarse honk. Emily jolted awake. "Grace?" she gasped, sitting up straight. The goose's eyes blinked open, cloudy but aware. "Mom! Dad! She's awake!" Emily cried, her heart leaping with hope. Carol rushed over, tears streaming down her face, while Robert called for Dr. Harper. The veterinarian arrived in moments, his face lighting up with cautious optimism as he examined Grace. "She's pulling through," he announced. A wave of relief swept over the room. Emily gently cupped Grace's head in her small hands. "You're going to be okay, girl," she whispered. "You're really going to be okay." Grace responded with a weak, but unmistakable honk of recognition. The next hours were filled with careful monitoring and quiet celebration. Grace still had a long road to full recovery, but the worst was behind her. Emily refused to leave her side, feeding her small sips of water from a dropper and softly singing to her. The bond between the girl and her guardian Goose had only deepened through the ordeal. Robert and Carol watched their daughter with pride and gratitude, their hearts full. "She's a hero," Robert said softly, watching Grace rest. "No," Carol corrected, smiling through her tears. "They both are." Morning light filtered softly through the wide windows of the recovery room at Green Valley Animal Hospital, casting a warm glow across the white-feathered patient resting on the thick bed of straw. Grace, the Harper family's brave goose, shifted slightly in her nest of blankets, blinking as the sunlight touched her face. She was awake. She was alive. And Emily Harper, perched on the edge of a chair beside her, could hardly believe her eyes. "You did it, Grace," Emily whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You really did it." The goose responded with a faint, croaky honk. Not the strong, confident call Emily was used to, but enough to send a wave of relief through her chest. Carol and Robert, who had taken turns dozing in the stiff plastic chairs overnight, stirred at the sound. Carol rose quickly, placing a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. "She's awake," Emily said with a tremulous smile, her eyes bright with tears. "She's really awake." Robert allowed himself a rare grin, nodding toward the recovering goose. "Looks like we've got ourselves a tough old bird," he said softly. Carol wiped a tear from her cheek, her heart swelling with gratitude. "She's not just tough," she replied, "she's our hero." The next few days passed in a careful routine of recovery. Dr. Harper, the veterinarian, monitored Grace closely, adjusting her medications and ensuring she had plenty of fluids and rest. Emily barely left her side, reading aloud from her favorite books and softly singing the lullabies her mother used to hum to her at bedtime. "See, Grace?" Emily whispered one afternoon as she turned a page. "We'll be home soon. I promise." As if understanding, Grace blinked slowly, her tired eyes softening. The bond between them had always been special, but now it felt unbreakable, forged in fire and fear, in courage and survival. Carol and Robert watched their daughter with quiet admiration. Through her worry and fear, Emily had shown a strength far beyond her years. "She's grown so much," Carol murmured to her husband as they stood at the doorway watching Emily stroke Grace's feathers. Robert nodded. "Bravery runs in the family." Finally, after nearly a week of tense waiting, Dr. Harper delivered the news they had all been hoping for. "She's strong enough to go home," he announced, a wide smile breaking across his face. "She's still got some healing left to do, but she's out of the woods." Joy erupted in the Harper family. Emily threw her arms around the veterinarian, nearly knocking him off balance. "Thank you. Thank you for saving her," she cried. Dr. Harper chuckled, gently patting her back. "Don't thank me," he said, glancing fondly at Grace. "She did most of the work herself." As they prepared to leave the clinic, Emily carefully wrapped Grace in a soft blanket, cradling her in her arms like the most precious treasure in the world. "You're coming home, Grace," she whispered. Back on the farm, the day of Grace's return felt like a holiday. The sun shone brightly over the fields and a gentle breeze stirred the tall grass. Neighbors and friends who had heard about the heroic Goose and her fight for life came by to offer well wishes and warm embraces. They brought flowers and small treats, even a homemade sign that read, "Welcome home, Grace, our hero." Emily beamed with pride as she carried Grace to her favorite spot under the old oak tree, laying her gently in the cool shade. Grace stretched her wings slowly, testing her strength. Though she was still weak, there was a determination in her movements that left no doubt she intended to heal fully. But for Emily, the joy of having Grace home was tempered by lingering fear. The yard, once her playground, now seemed full of hidden dangers. Every rustle of grass, every flicker of shadow sent a chill down her spine. "Mommy," she asked one afternoon, her small voice uncertain, "what if the snakes come back?" Carol knelt beside her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We'll be careful," she promised gently. "We'll keep the grass trimmed short, and Daddy's already cleared out the old woodpile. And remember, Grace is here. She'll watch over you." Emily's gaze drifted to the resting Goose, a spark of courage lighting in her chest. She nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." As the days turned to weeks, Grace's strength returned bit by bit. First, she stood steadily on her own. Then she began to waddle short distances, stretching her wings in the sunshine. Finally, one bright morning, she let out a strong, clear honk that echoed across the farmyard, the sound of victory, of life reclaimed. Emily clapped her hands with joy, running to her feathered friend. "You did it, Grace. You're back." Grace responded by flapping her wings, stirring the dust at Emily's feet. Carol and Robert stood nearby, their hearts swelling with pride and relief. "She's a fighter," Robert said, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "Just like Emily," Carol replied, her eyes shining. To celebrate Grace's full recovery, the family decided to host a small gathering. They set up a picnic beneath the old oak tree, inviting neighbors and friends to join in honoring the brave Goose who had risked everything to protect their little girl. Emily helped decorate the yard with colorful streamers and handmade signs. One read, "Grace the Guardian, our feathered hero." Children from nearby farms brought drawings of Grace and pictures of geese wearing capes. Someone even fashioned a tiny medal out of foil and ribbon, which Emily carefully placed around Grace's neck. "You're our champion," she said, kissing the top of Grace's head. Grace preened proudly, her feathers gleaming in the sun. As the celebration unfolded, Emily felt a new sense of peace settle over her. The fear that had haunted her since the attack began to fade, replaced by a deeper understanding of courage and resilience. She realized that even when danger strikes, love and bravery can overcome it. That even a goose, small and simple in the eyes of the world, could become a hero. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Emily sat beside Grace, her heart full. "Thank you for saving me, Grace," she whispered. The goose responded with a soft, contented honk, nuzzling closer to her young friend. Together, they watched the sunset, guardians of each other's hearts.